You are listening to Over and Back's Basketball Mysteries of the 1970s. Today's mystery is, who made the dunk rise? All right, we're back. I am Jason. With me as usual is Rich, and we are going to talk about a little bit of the evolution of the slam dunk. And so what do we got about the slam dunk, Rich?
Yeah, so a bunch of stuff here. We'll start out, we'll get to the 70s here because that's really when the dunk rise, had its real rise to prominence. But we'll go with a little bit of history to kind of get you caught up. Most astute listeners of the show know probably during the 40s, 50s, and 60s, dunks, it wasn't like they didn't happen. They happened, but the execution of the slam dunk was kind of seen as a personal affront. It was seen as showboaty, as really kind of sticking it to their team and being a show off. Boston Celtic Satch Sanders had a quote that I found. In the old days, defenders would run under you when you were in the air, trying to take people out of games so they couldn't play. It was an unwritten rule. So obviously, dunks, they were not as happy to have those happen, of course, but there were quite a few guys that still kind of put them into their game and really kind of popularized them before they exploded in the 70s. Wilt, of course, is a huge proponent of the dunk. Easiest way for him to score, and he was just so good at it as well. There's a quote I found from Elvin Hayes in a November 1968 Sports Illustrated. He says, that dunk shot of Wilt's, which, by the way, it was always called a dunk shot until Chick Hearn, of course, the Lakers famous broadcaster, is the guy who first popularized the slam dunk, which we know as, but really until he kind of popularized it. And even then, he was saying slam dunk for a while before people really caught on, but it was called the dunk shot for many, many years. So if you hear us say that is why it was actually called the dunk shot. But that dunk shot of Wilt, it's inhuman. Not a man in the world can stop that, and I'd sure hate to be the one that had to try. One time I was under the basket when he dunked a shot. The force was unbelievable, unreal. I remember Nate Thurman telling me, he said, Elvin, don't go in there and get yourself hurt. So that's...
So one of the first smaller dunkers, and smaller is obviously a relative term here because he was 6'5" and probably 220 or so. Elgin Baylor was one of the first better smaller dunkers. I mean, he obviously had just that incredible athleticism, that incredible craft. Really a guy who could not just get above the rim, but actually live above the rim as a scorer. And Bob Cousy had a great quote that said it pretty well. Elgin was the first one that I remember that could hang up there for 15 seconds, have some lunch and a cup of coffee, and really a forerunner for a lot of this new generation of dunkers that are really going to take over the game in the 70s. He's the guy who really inspires them because he's the first player on a national level to really demonstrate just those incredible moves.
Right, it's not a guy who's 7 foot and just kind of dropping it into the hoop as well. He's a guy who's driving the lane and kind of rising up over guys. He's really one of the first ones we talk about that's just not this hulking big man that just kind of turns around and throws it down, but a guy who really is cutting the lane more so what we'd see then and really think of as dunking through the rest of the history. Because right now, I personally I always envision dunks as being kind of the not your 7 footers. Of course it's cool when guys like a Shaq and DeAndre, but I really love a Vince Carter, a guy that just shows like a veracity and really just kind of drives the lane and rises up from there. Russell Westbrook type, those kind of guys who I always kind of look at. And Elgin is probably the first guy of that we really look at. So it's cool there. Connie Hawkins, he's probably the next guy that you would say put his mark on the shot because he sort of expanded on what Elgin did and added an additional violence and flair to the dunks that had not been seen before, because he just was Elgin was going over guys and going through the lanes or whatever, but Connie was really just kind of doing it with a lot more violence and a lot more just kind of showmanship and flair or whatever than Elgin really was. It was kind of people starting to get comfortable going, hey, I can do this dunk thing and guys aren't going to hate me or take me out or whatever, and Connie was really one of the first guys that really expanded upon that and made it kind of an art form, and it was kind of one of his signature shots, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And he had those large hands like Julius Erving would later, so he had an extra ability to hold on to the ball and to approach from different angles and to hold on to a ball that other guys couldn't hold on to in situations, obviously affecting how he could dunk and expanding his arsenal. And he was blackballed from the NBA unfairly, so he was developing his game, playing in AAU leagues, playing in playgrounds, playing in environments where he was even better than most of the players that he was playing than he would have been in the NBA, and also in a situation where he probably had more room to be creative and more room to kind of do what he wanted.
Yeah, and we'll move. This is not NBA or whatever, but it's worth noting as well that a young Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, when he began playing at UCLA in 1967, that the NCAA instituted a rule became known as the Lew Alcindor Rule that forbid any player from dunking the basketball in a game. So they got out ahead of this Kareem thing and said, nope, you can't do it. You can't do it. So it was kind of funny, though. That's 1967. We talk about, in the 70s, this huge revolution from the ABA. That really was a big part. I mean, there was, of course, dunking in the NBA, and we'll talk about a few guys that kind of started that. But really, it was the ABA that I don't want to say encouraged it, but the wide open nature of the game, the league's desire to be kind of an entertainment league versus the NBA. The NBA was that stuck up league. The NCAA was kind of stuck up as well. But we're flash and flare. We let guys dress how they want. They can play how they want. There was just it just lent itself perfectly to the ABA being that, and the ABA was a lot more of a wide open game. There was a bigger talent disparity, so it just made sense that the ABA would be this place where it would kind of go nuts and reach that next level. We see quite a few innovators from the ABA as well. The helicopter, who is one that's mentioned in a story in Loose Balls. I'll give this story here real quick. Again, this is from Terry Pluto's great book, Loose Balls on the ABA. It says the helicopter went up for a slam and just tore the rim right off. I mean, you'd have to think the whole arena was coming down. He had a powerful one-handed tomahawk slam. It was really a sight. The first time it happened, yes, I said the first time, was late in the first half, and they held up the game for an hour, but eventually found another rim and a backboard. But in the second half, the same damn thing happened again. Helicopter went up for a dunk, and I said to myself, oh no, not again. Sure enough, he broke another backboard. Now I knew we were in real trouble. Where were we going to find another backboard? It was about 11 at night. The Cougars GM Carl Shearer wanted to call off the game and then replay it with a big promotion, broken backboard night or some such thing. The most ABA thing ever would be running it back as a broken backboard game. Jack McMahon was coaching Pittsburgh, and he said he didn't care if they had to wait until 3 a.m. We were going to finish the game. They brought in a wooden backboard from a local high school, and we did finish probably about 3 a.m. I had worked in the NBA since 1960, and I had never seen one backboard smashed, and the helicopter did it twice in one night.
Yes, the helicopter is Charlie Hentz, by the way.
Sorry.
Yes, and
he's not an N1 mixtape player. He actually has a real name.
Right.
So.
Yes. So he, that's not much else to his career, but he played 57 games for the Condors. They changed the name by then. So there you go. Charlie Hentz, the helicopter. Yeah, I had kind of forgotten that story on the first read of Loose Balls, and always thought of course, of Darryl Dawkins as being the guy who did that, but helicopter did it first. So, and
I know, I think in Loose Balls as well, they mentioned that Charlie Williams, his teammate, says the helicopter just stood there smiling, like he knew goddamn well what he was doing, yes. But he just didn't care. Like yes. You could do it. And then they a bunch of articles I was reading as well talked about that one of the big things that probably led to more dunking going on in kind of the mid to late 70s, which we'll talk about innovators here in a little bit, is that they finally said, okay, we have to stop these guys from breaking the damn backboards. So some leagues, little by little, were starting to institute kind of the breakaway rim. And it was a really interesting story. I don't have a link for it, but I'll see if I can find it and put it in the show description. But the guy that commissioned knew nothing about basketball. They basically said, hey, every time people dunk, the backboard breaks, so fix that. And he found a way to do it and said that he only watched dunks, he only cared about dunks, he only looked at dunks because that's all he didn't really care to know about basketball at all. Because I think there was things where guys would throw a bad shot and it would hit the front of the rim, and sometimes the backboard would break. So it just became a constant problem for the leagues. And a really interesting story. I'll see if I can find it and link it in the show description as well.
Yeah, and so some of the other guys who were real innovators during the 70s. Gus Johnson, another guy who was known for breaking backboards on his jump and just had incredible power and ferocity on his dunk. I mean, maybe like a little bit of an early Sean Kemp or even Blake Griffin to a certain extent, as far as just kind of like the compact strength that he had in those dunks. I think that might be a fairly good comparison. Yeah. David Thompson, who was kind of a proto Michael Jordan, a guy who really inspired Jordan's game and the way that he played later, not just in dunking but sort of in everything else. But Jordan says the whole term and the whole measuring of vertical leap began with David Thompson. He vaulted off the ground, exploded off the ground, and people, when he came into the ABA in '76, where it was very much a feeling of this is Dr. J in a guard's body. I mean, that was basically kind of what he did, only he was a better shooter, and obviously a little bit smaller, but could had that potential to be that player, and his career didn't work out that way. But so still for a few years was just an incredible all around player, and especially an incredible dunker.
Yeah, and then Darnell Dr. Dunk Hillman. When your name is Dr. Dunk, you are a dunk innovator. So
Yes.
he was the Indiana Pacer, known for his stylized dunks and, of course, his oversized afro. Nice little tidbit here. At the 1997 ABA reunion, Hillman won the very coveted biggest ABA afro award, which I believe was voted on by the play. I don't know who the hell it voted on, but it was apparently a very big deal of who won the biggest afro, and he was very happy to have won that afro as well,
Yes,
or that afro award as well.
Dr. J talks about in his book about he and Hillman trading afro tips. They shared some tidbits with each other. So that was
I
nice.
really wonder, and I could not find anything, even though I tried very desperately to see if they actually made like a trophy for it. I could not find it.
Oh, okay.
So because it would have been an easy trophy to make.
True.
Like, yeah, but you know, I as far as I know, they did not. But we can maybe contact Darnell Hillman, I believe.
Right.
He's still alive. Yeah,
he works for the Pacers, actually.
So.
Yeah, he's in community.
Oh, right. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So,
So,
okay, cool. We'll call him. He'll, of course, want to come on here. It'd be an honor for him
I'm sure it would be. Yes.
come on to Over and Back podcast.
Yeah.
His favorite NBA history podcast, and tell us if they actually gave him an award. So,
Yeah.
I have to dig up and see if he's got an email address somewhere. We've had surprisingly good response when we just email random people questions.
That's
so
true.
maybe we can get lucky here again. But the dunk really arrived on center stage. It was 1976 when the ABA hosted the very first slam dunk contest. Here's from Remember the ABA. This is Jim Bakuda, who was the PR for the ABA, recalling his moment when they kind of decided, hey, this dunk contest thing might be a decent idea. So here's a quote. He said, "We actually got the idea from Julius Erving in a roundabout way. We had a guy named Jim Keeler, who was African-American, who handled business affairs for the league. Julius used to kid him all the time, saying, 'I bet you're the only black guy involved in the ABA who can't dunk.' And he says, and it kind of came in a sort of, the quote's kind of weird, but basically that was like, they kind of had the idea of like, you know what, yeah, a lot of these guys can dunk. Like, why don't we do this? Like, we can maybe do this thing. Like, there, of course, you know, knowing the ABA, and we've talked about it many times during the series, anything they could do to get extra attention on the league, anything different than the NBA, anything that could really just stand out, they were all for. So they were having this all-star game and had this idea, hey, let's do a dunk contest. Why not? The lineup was Artis Gilmore, Larry Keenan, George Gervin, David Thompson, and Julius Erving. Each man was instructed to do 5 dunks in 2 minutes, 1 under the rim, 1 from the bottom free throw circle, and 3 freelance approaches from the left, right, and baseline. I like these ideas. They should do this again.
Yeah. I mean,
I like kind of restricting it in a minor way. You know, not maybe doing the dunk wheel does not need to come back, but I like the idea of sort of restricting a little bit of, you know, under the rim, you know, because then you get a little bit more flair there, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, the 76 dunk contest actually holds up pretty well as just kind of a fun little thing to watch. There's a I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube. It's definitely on available on, you know, NBA League Pass in the, you know, the archived games section. You know, it's available there. At least it was up until recently. So worth checking out if you haven't. You know, the dunks are obviously, they're 40-year-old dunks, so some of them are still impressive. Some of them are
some are really
basic.
good. Yeah, I'm going to talk about a few here in a little bit, but yeah, I was kind of shocked when I went back and rewatched it. Like, the ones under the rim suck. Like, you see a highlight video and you see like the guy under the rim like putting down a dunk, because I didn't know that those were part of the rules. So every time I see this, you always see like David Thompson like just rising up from under the rim and dunking. You're like, oh, come on, like that's not really much. But that was part of the rules. And then you see what they went with the finals, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. It's just, they really do hold up pretty well. The final 2, David Thompson and Julius Erving. Thompson saved his best for last, hitting a baseline 360 dunk, which actually does hold up remarkably well, that dunk. It's very good, especially for a man his size and the way he was able to kind of do it. So people are rooting nuts. Okay, Thompson locked it up. Baseline 360, you can't top that. What are you going to do? Little did he or the rest of the world know that Dr. J had something in store. And, of course, Dr. J hit his free throw line dunk and won. So that's, which also holds up remarkably well.
I like the story about him and Doug Moe betting about whether he could actually do the dunk. And then you can see Doug Moe in the video pointing to the spot on the free throw line because, you know, his toe is slightly over the free throw line. So, you know, he points at it. It's like, oh, he was over the line. It doesn't count.
I'm not paying.
I mean, they made a side bet on it and everything. So that's a great. Obviously, you know, the dunk contest is one of the things that the ABA is best known for, even though it only happened in the last year of the league. The year, honestly, the league was not in good shape at that point. You know, a bunch of teams had been contracted, and it, you know, the All-Star game was, you know, the Denver Nuggets were one team versus, you know, the best collection of ABA players in the other team. So because the Nuggets were in first place and they were in Denver, they kind of lucked into that. So you know, it was sort of a nice moment for you know, what were the dark days of the league.
Yeah, and there's also stories as well that lineup was basically just guys that were good dunkers that were also on all-star teams. Like, they didn't want to fly anybody else in, new, so it was kind of like, all right, who's here? Who wants to dunk? All right, you guys get out there. Like, it wasn't like a carefully planned list of, like, the best of the best. I mean, they did a very good job picking guys, but it wasn't like they had, okay, who are the best dunkers? It was basically, who are the best dunkers of guys that are already here in Denver that we don't have to fly in. So that was definitely a part that they were interested in doing. And interestingly enough, 1976-77, there was a lost NBA dunk contest. There's some great details in truthaboutit.com, which is a Washington Wizards True Hoop blog. But really the details are sketchy. It was apparently won by our good friend Dr. Dunk, Darryl Hillman, but the information is severely lacking. The hope was from the NBA to capitalize on the popularity of the ABA's dunk contest in their final All-Star game, as you just mentioned. So the NBA launched an aggressive slam dunk event of its own in 1976-77. The first after the merger. Each team had one representative and player that would be paired for dunk-offs when their teams met during the regular season. The big names of the era were involved, including Julius Erving, George Gervin, David Thompson. So just to get you an idea, each team had one representative and players would be paired for dunk-offs when their teams met during the regular season. So this isn't like, this is, constant dunk contest going on all the time. So just a really interesting thing. The big names, of course, as I mentioned, Julius Erving, George Gervin, Dave Thompson, who were given the opportunity to be eliminated 3 times by the network. So they had to be defeated 3 times. Everybody else was out of there right away. But the network, CBS, was anxious for star power, so that was okay. After the third elimination, Thompson was finally dropped from the bracket. The list of participants is very hard to find. The apbr.org forums, they were able to kind of get some lists, but it's not corroborated. It's hard to know exactly, but of course there's tons of participants. You have Joe Merriweather from the Atlanta Hawks. The Chicago Bulls had Mickey Johnson, Denver Nuggets David Thompson, Detroit Pistons ML Carr, Warriors Larry McNeil, Indiana Pacers Darnell Hillman, Kansas City Kings Richard Washington, Los Angeles Lakers Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, which has got to be hilarious to see. I can't imagine he was very on board for doing a dunk contest in his free time. Milwaukee Bucks Alex English, the Philadelphia 76ers Darryl Dawkins, Phoenix Suns Ronnie Lee, Portland Trailblazers and Moses Malone, Washington Bullets Elvin Hayes, and San Antonio Spurs George Gervin. According to reports, Hillman beat Moses Malone and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar on his way to the title round. He faced Golden State Warriors Larry the Hawk McNeil in a dunk-off during the NBA Finals, with Hillman winning thanks in large part to his signature Rock the Cradle slam. The contest was met with lukewarm response and was shelved, and the NBA did not revisit the dunk contest until 1984. So kept it in the back burner for a while. But just a really interesting story of kind of the NBA saying, hey, we can get in on this, and it did not work. And that's just way too much dunking. And nobody needs that. That's just obnoxious to have it in the halftime of every game, or they didn't even specify it was halftime or before the game. I don't know when they had it, but it was every time that those teams face off in the regular season, which is just far too many times. So
yeah, I think you could kind of make something interesting if you had like a limited tournament type thing, and sort of accompany it with a few games. But that does sound a little bit cumbersome and extensive, and obviously the once they revive the format in 84, that obviously has worked for, pretty well for, 30 plus years. So,
And you have to remember the NBA at this time too is still kind of the ABA is the flashy dynamic league, and the NBA is kind of the stuffy one or whatever. So I'm sure, having a dunk contest at halftime wasn't necessarily the thing that every NBA fan was really on board with, or NBA coach or any of that sort of stuff.
Right. Yeah.
As well. So
yeah, I'm sure it was if nothing else, just sort of awkward for the NBA with its stuffy image to be getting into this, if nothing, if nothing else. So obviously they would sort of more openly embrace the ABA's past legacy in future years, but at this point less so.
Absolutely. So yeah, a lot of just great dunkers, but yeah, it's a lot of history of guys that dunk. It's really hard to kind of come up with the one. I mean, Dr. J is the one that everybody sort of brings up, but at least we wanted to mention a few other guys that had a part as well. But of course, I don't even know. Did I actually forget to mention Dr. J at some point? But I think I might have. But yes, you are aware that Dr. J also was good at dunking.
Yeah,
so.
we're gonna have more on Dr. J's dunking in a future episode, so we'll save that for that. But
also a breaking news that Dr. J good at dunking and kind of a revolution to the dunk game, so the dunk shot game. But yeah, there was a few other guys that definitely played a huge part in it as well. But
cool. Well, thanks everyone for checking us out. You can find us at hardwoodparoxysm.com. We are on iTunes and Stitcher and pretty much anywhere where you want to listen to your podcast. You can find us. If you would leave us a rating and review when you do, that would be awesome. We like those. And we find us on Facebook and Twitter at Over and Back NBA. So thanks for listening, and we'll be back again soon.